How much of the responsibility for the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, do you think belongs to the Israelis for their tactics like seizing land and occupying territory that didn't belong to them? How much of it is the responsibility of the Palestinians for their suicide terror attacks and their bombings within Israel proper?
What is supposed to get me riled up about a strip of land that if your realtor sold it to you, you would sue him?
Before 48, everybody lived in peace, side by side. The problem started when the government started to interfere, you know, politics and land and fighting about land, and it's going until now.
So, for the love of God, will someone in the Palestinian territories read a little bit of history and see how Gandhi won in India, how Mandela won in South Africa, how King won in America? He did it through nonviolence. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It means you're even stronger. It means you're willing to get hit and not respond. You're willing to take that hit over and over and march and protest and get arrested and get beaten and maybe even get killed. If you do it the right way, you will have the whole world behind you. Because what Israel is doing, in the final analysis, is fundamentally wrong.
Aref Pasha Dajani, a Palestinian leader from Jerusalem, warned that it is impossible to live with the Jews. In all the countries where they are at present, they are not wanted because they always arrive to suck the blood of everybody. If the League of Nations will not listen to the appeal of the Arabs, this country will become a river of blood.
If somebody came and said, all right, look, the place you live, you don't control it, I control it, and I tell you where you can go, where you can't go, and you don't rule it, I rule it, would you fight?
But there's no doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid. The occupation of Palestinian land, the confiscation of that land that doesn't belong to Israel, the building of settlements on it, the colonization of that land, and then the connection of those isolated but multiple settlements, more than 200 of them, with each other by highways, on which Palestinians can't travel, and quite often where Palestinians cannot even cross. So the persecution of the Palestinians now under the occupied territories is under the occupation forces is one of the worst examples of human rights deprivation that I know. What is being done to the Palestinians now is horrendous in their own territory by the occupying powers, which is Israel. They've taken away all the basic human rights of the Palestinians.
You live in Gaza. I was in Ramallah when that happened. It's horrible to live there. They don't have a life.
Well, first of all, they're being blockaded by Egypt as well. As I brought up to the Queen, this West Bank was under Jordanian control for all that time, and they weren't given their independence. So let's not shit a shitter.
How do you see the Palestinian territories today, and what danger does the expansion of the settlements represent for Palestinian security?
It's very serious. Carrying on with the policy of settlement building and all it implies, walls of separation, arrests, the inhuman and unjust embargo imposed on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, where food and medicines are used to keep pressure on 1.5 million people. The Israeli government is apparently adamant about pursuing its colonization policy and keeping the status quo for its own interests as a source of power. I think the Palestinian Authority will no longer accept this.
How do you judge Israel's demand that the Palestinians recognize it as a Jewish state?
It is an unacceptable demand. On the 9th of September 1993, there was an exchange of letters of recognition between the Palestinian Liberation Organization, represented by the martyr Yasser Arafat, and the Israeli Prime Minister of the time, Yitzhak Rabin. The affair is closed. Asking us to recognize Israel as a Jewish state is asking us to join the Zionist movement.
My question is, last night in your State of the Union address, you spoke of America's support for human rights. Then why have we not condemned Israel and Egypt's human rights violations against the occupied Palestinian people, and yet we continue to support financially with billions of dollars coming from our tax dollars?
Hashem gave this land to the Jewish people. He gave it to Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and all the descendants. He did not give it to Ishmael's people at all. They belong not in this land. If they're to be in this land, they're to do the things according to what is right in the Jewish country. This is a Jewish country. It's not a matter of the state of Israel. It's a matter that Hashem gave us Eretz Yisrael.
Apartheid is not based on racism, as it was in South Africa, but it's based on the desire of a minority of Israelis to acquire land that belongs to the Palestinians and to retain that land, and then to exclude the Palestinians from their own property and subjugate them so that they can't arouse and demonstrate their disapproval of being robbed of their own property.
There is a lot of concern that what is happening on the international stage is really becoming an excuse for the Netanyahu government not to address real concerns that people have here. I mean, talking to protesters, they accuse Netanyahu of being passive, of being unresponsible, and of being out of touch with what people in Israel are concerned about.
The point is there's a revolution happening in the world, you know, and we're looking away from that towards a kind of old quarrel. And we should be looking at the new world that we could be helping to bring into being.
The whole purpose of the Israeli-Palestinian process is processed just in order to demonstrate that one is doing the right thing. But let's be honest, no one really cares about the Palestinians or the Israeli security issue.